It's my great pleasure and honor to be the moderator of this third plenary session. And I'm very glad to be able to moderate the talk of three philosophers. So the first speaker is Cornel MORARU from Bucharest, and his presentation is about the virtual self. Is authenticity possible in the digital era? Cornel, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here posing this question, which I think it's very important, and it's a question that concerns all of us, as long as we all take part in what we can call digital society. Every time we open our phones to check our emails or to enter the social media or things like that, we make a switch between our actual self and what we can call a virtual self, or an avatar, or a digital personality. And I want to explore this virtual self because we oftenly feel a tension between our actual personality and our virtual existence, sort of speaking. And I think this feeling is what motivates us to view digital existence as inauthentic or untrue. We feel that it is somewhat unreal, and that it is not in harmony, in concordance with our real true self, what we would call our authentic self. And I think basically that this feeling, this intuition, is based on a rather naive understanding of virtuality, and on a kind of approximative understanding of authenticity. So my aim is here to sketch a philosophical concept of authenticity that can be a ground for thinking about digital authenticity as a real possibility. And needless to say, this is a work in progress. I don't have a question. I have a question, but I don't have an answer right now. Sorry, I think this is really Freudian, Freudian or something like that. So I'm willing to talk about two important things right now: the concept of authenticity and how we can view this concept in the light of its etymology, because I'm a philologist, and I have this assumption that the language that we speak is wiser than us, so we have to listen to it. And because I also graduated philosophy, I think that I will mention some concepts that are also used in theology, but I won't get into any technical discussions. I will just view them from the light of the history of philosophical ideas. So if I have some slips concerning the doctrine, please forgive me from the start. Then the second thing I want to talk about is the concept of virtuality, and I'll make a risky assumption that I will argue for, meaning that we need to revisit some important philosophical debates in order to understand virtuality. And I'm thinking about two interesting debates in the Middle Ages, namely the debate around the nature of angels, and the second is the meaning of the biblical syntagm, power of God, Dunamis Theo. And then I'll try to sketch some conclusions. Talking about authenticity, we can start from an ethical understanding, meaning that authenticity is a state of consciousness in which one has the faith, and I will get back on that later, that his or her personality is self-made, not imposed from the social or cultural background. I think this is an important point to start with, because this ethical meaning is also present in ancient philosophy, especially in Stoicism. I'm thinking here about the definition of freedom in Stoicism that is related with authenticity, meaning that freedom is, basically speaking, to handle one's own business, or to have the power over all one's actions. The Greek concept is exousia autoparagias, which I think is important to mention, that here we talk about a power that enables us to act freely and to govern our own actions. So in the Stoic line of thought, freedom implies not our self-made freedom, but a superior principle that grants this freedom, and that superior principle is the divine in Stoic thinking. Interestingly enough, is that the same term, exousia, is also a theological term and is used in Christianity, where the power of God, the authority of God, is named authentike kai teike exousia. Is authentic. If this is not the literal meaning, but we can use that, the authentic authority over all things. This is a kind of absolute power that empowers everything else, every person, to have its own freedom. And here we get to the concept of the power of God, of Dunamis Deo, or Virtus Dei, if we consider the Septuagint or the Vulgate. This is important because when we talk about this concept and about the concept of authenticity, we have to take into account various aspects. That's here named the legal meaning, which we also find in theology and in ancient Greek philosophy. Namely, the divine is the legal authority, the one that gives the law, and also the judge. Some kind of artistic meaning, artistic aspect of authenticity. When you talk about an authentic artist, and this is the creator, another attribute of the divine. Then we have an ontological authority. Authentic means real in the highest sense, and that is the Middle Ages concept of perfect being. And then we have cognitive authority. Authentic means true, without any rest, without any falseness, and that is all-knowing. So in every aspect of authenticity, we have attributes of God or attributes of the divine. Now, I was talking about authenticity as faith or belief, because authenticity is a state of consciousness that cannot be assessed from the outside. It's congruity with one's own reflection of self, and that means that it is a belief or a faith, and it does not designate a real thing outside the consciousness of the bearer. And this means that basically authenticity is a relation between ourselves and the world, or an attitude towards the world. And it's a peculiar type of relation. It's a relation between thinking and being, marked by some kind of concordance between what we are and what we think of being. And this, I think, is interesting, because this concordance between thinking and being, between knowing and einai, is on a personal level what on a cosmic level Parmenides talks about in his fragments, when he says that it's the same thing to think about something and being. Togar, I won't do that. So here, authenticity is the same thing that Parmenides talks about, is the common substrate of being and thinking in the subjective area of the individual. And then again, authenticity as exousia, as a power, is a force that grants this common ground of all thinking. So we basically end up back talking about the same attributes of God that we talked about earlier, but on an ontological level. So we have the distinction of thinking and being in relation to authenticity, and then we have the distinction about possible and actual, about dynamis and energia, because also authenticity is a kind of relation. That in which the actual self corresponds to the ideal self. So we have a relation about energia and dynamis, about actuality and possibility. And this is this, I think, is important, because in this domain of the self, things are quite the opposite as in the domain of the word. Meaning that if we talk about truth as correspondence, then our thoughts have to correspond to some state outside of us. But when we talk about authenticity, it's the other way around. Our actual self needs to correspond with our projected self, with what we think about ourselves. So this is another interesting relation that we might talk about in the form of mimesis or homoiosis, of trying to get to that that ideal self that we can have. Another interesting distinction. Whoa. Make it. Another interesting distinction
from us.
would be about, between belief and option, also occurring in the poem of Parmenides, where pistis is not the same thing as doxa. Faith is not the same thing as option, just because faith accompanies the road to truth, while doxa is basically some opinion the mortals, how Parmenides call the hoi polloi, the many, have. So in this sense, authenticity is some kind of noetic faith that directs us towards invisible realities that can be uncovered by our understanding or intellect. And here we can understand this as our ideal self, or in theological background, we can understand this as the will of God for us. Now, turning to virtuality, it's interesting that from an etymological point of view, virtuality comes from the Middle Ages. It's an invention of the scholastic, and I think that what made this possible is the syntagm Virtus Dei, which means power of God, and it's a Latin translation of Dynamis Deo that I think makes a difference in the distinction between dynamis and energia, between possibility and actuality, that makes room for virtuality. Because virtuality is not possibility and is not actuality. It's something that is always actual, but it's unseen. It's some way between possibility and actuality, and this is the way in which we can think about the power of God, which is active every single moment in us and in things of the world, but it is unseen for the naked eye. It is seen only for faith. And here, as you can see, we circle around the same concepts, namely faith, authenticity, power of God, virtuality. So we have a triple conceptual distinction between actuality, potentiality, and virtuality that was configured in the late Middle Ages in the scholastic tradition, especially in Thomas Aquinas, who I think uses virtualiter as clearly different word from potentiality. And I think this is debatable because there are many texts in which scholars say they are the same. But there are two contexts that I want to refer to, where it cannot be, virtualiter cannot be the same as potentialiter. And this is the talk about angels and the talk about virtues. Because Aquinas says that all virtues are virtualiter justice. Because justice is active in each and every virtue. Although we have different definitions of virtues, justice is what makes them possible. This, I don't think we can translate virtualiter through potentially or possibly, because here is an active sense of virtuality. It's an active sense that justice acts through all virtues. And the other one is, this is the discussions of angels in Summa Theologiae, where Aquinas thinks about virtuality, the virtuality of angels, as the domain of some active forces that are active, that are actual in our reality, but that manifest themselves through things and apply themselves through things. Aquinas says that basically angels are not in a place in reality, but apply themselves to a place in reality. And this is the way in which virtual objects, any virtual object applies itself in reality. Through applications. We have that name for the programs that generate virtual objects. If we think about virtuality in this way, we come to see that the categories of reality and the virtual categories, although they are in name the same, they are different things. There are like two sets of categories that apply themselves to each other, are isomorphisms, if we can call them that, but are not the same set of categories. So we have to treat virtual existence in its own terms and reality in its own terms. And now, for a quick conclusion, for conclusions, I think that yes, authenticity can be possible in the digital society if we take into account this difference between the virtual self, the virtual existence, and the actual existence. And in this way, we can generate, or we can think about an ontology of the virtual, of the virtual world, of the virtual reality, that has embedded in it the concept of authenticity. So, starting from this point of view, digital authenticity is the power to contain one's own actions in the virtual world according to the same ethical values freely chosen by the individual, and also the power to not be affected by digital interactions that we cannot control. This is a really stoic version of authenticity, but I think it applies good enough to digital existence. Thank you.